Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, everybody, welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. We're back for another off-season episode. Got some fun things planned for you guys today. We're using some new tech, so got a slide presentation set up for you guys. We're going to throw in at the end, and what you can expect there is what current Georgia Bulldogs told us, the Players Lounge, about 2024 signees. They're already turning heads, so we're going to jump into those quotes directly from some key players for Georgia football team. And I found it really interesting. I think you guys will love it. We'll talk that through a little bit. You know, Georgia's number one class obviously has some dogs. They got some dogs, and they're playing up to their rankings as far as recruiting goes so far. And they came in early, and the bulk of Georgia's class signed in December 20th. So a lot of those guys participated in bowl practices. Now they're in winter workouts and such. So that's what you can expect. And then none other than Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end, is going to join me in doing that. New co-host, analyst, UGA Football Live. How are you doing, Artie?
Doing well. Excited about the show, but really B, largely speaking about the kind of off-season shows, because I think now more than ever, with kind of the dynamics of college football and where I personally think it's going, I think there's going to be a lot of newsworthy things that are happening this off-season, but just kind of continuously going into the season this fall. I think there's a lot of funky stuff that's happening that is going to change the dynamic of college football long term.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it.
And that is the perfect transition to my first topic here, Artie. And that is the SEC and Big Ten forming an advisory group, right? So they're pairing up. First thing that came to my mind, Artie, is they run college football. You have the SEC and the Big Ten, and everybody underneath them is going to be doing basically what they put in place, right?
Yep.
And I think this shows us that eventually they're going to be, separated from the NCAA entirely, create their own rules, own NIL rules around that, and regulations that I think we can all agree are much needed. The portal windows, the scheduling conflicts that we've seen, a slew of coaches talk about even publicly, right? They're starting to say that more often, is the really the inefficiencies with the schedule and when the transfer portal is, and how that deals with recruiting as well from the high school level. So what do you think about that? The two largest conferences, most money makers in college football joining up here as they happen to expand their conference themselves this upcoming season.
Yeah, look, I've kind of been on this wagon or on this train now for a while, privately, a little bit publicly in my tweets and kind of stuff that I've been posting on social media about where I think college sports is going. And to me, it's there's the two P's that I use, like the privatization and the professionalization of college football. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I think there's going to be kind of a tectonic shift, if you will, in what we see as college sports to where it's going. And, my day job, if you will, as much as I hope that one day UGA Football Live will pay some bills of mine, for right now, my day job is always been in kind of private investments, right? In finance. After NFL, got into finance, did the military for a bit, but really most of my stuff has been finance. And I've always been, the one thing I've learned in life is you got to follow the money, right? In any trending industry, right? You always kind of see where people are making larger investments. And I think in the past 10 years, it really started when I was in college. You started seeing like college football going from like a popular sport to an entire separate industry, right? I think social media, I think, both legacy media companies and social media companies, and then a few, rule changes along the way have really created this kind of market of college football and college sports, but really college football. And it has turned it into a multi-billion-dollar business, right? what has transformed in the past 3 to 4 years and accelerated that change, as you and I know, and as we have discussed, is really two things: the transfer portal and NIL. Transfer portal is another word for free agency. NIL is just another word of, hey, we're going to pay these players in some way, shape, or form. We're just not going to do it with the checks being signed by President Moorhead or Josh Brooks, the athletic director and president. It's going to be through a collective or whatever, right? And I think the Big Ten and the SEC realize that they are the ones that generate the amount of money that comes into the industry of college football, right? They're the ones that generate the high dollars, the big dollars. They have the largest TV contracts. They are where the schools, they are the homes of schools, the largest followings, and they have the most national championships and acquire the most talent for these players. And thus, since they're the largest programs, they have the largest collectives. That's why Ohio State can go spend $13.5 million in 30 days and retain some of their top talent, but go poach some top talent from other SEC and Big Ten schools. Similarly, why Georgia, maybe not Alabama right now, but why Georgia can go and sign class after class after class in the top 1, 2, or 3, because A, they're a national championship, winning football team back to back, almost could have had 3 in a row. But in reality, they are not quite a Fortune 500 company, but they operate as such, right? I know on good authority that their operating budget was over $200 million this year. That is a huge amount of money for an athletic program, right? And so I think, to your point, we see the two behemoths of these conferences, right? The Big Ten signed a 3-network, 7-year, $7.2 billion deal 2 years ago. It goes into effect this year, right? That's between CBS, Fox, and NBC. The SEC has like a direct special relationship with ESPN. Lord knows how much money that is going to entail. So I think those two conferences stepping out of this kind of NCAA fake jail that the NCAA has kind of, not jail, but let's call it, kingdom, that they think that they've been, the biggest sheriff in town or the sheriff in town, right? I think you're going to see these two leagues come together and be like, hey, how can we make the most money for our schools? A, and B, how can we kind of flick away this annoying fly that is the NCAA? And I have been of the opinion, and before I let you comment, I want to say this about the NCAA. I have been of the opinion that the NCAA needs to be more proactive. They need to take the same stance that, say, the NBA or the NFL or these professional sports leagues have taken in recent years, empowering the players and finding ways to make the product more attractive to a wider audience, instead of hanging on to this archaic sense of amateurism that is a bunch of BS. Because how can the president of the NCAA sit there and scream amateurism when they take home $3-4 million a year? So I think the NCAA either needs to get super proactive and work alongside the Big Ten or the SEC, or the NCAA as we know it and as they know it is going to get left in the dust here soon by the two warships that are coming together to form a team in the SEC and the Big Ten. But that's kind of my spiel around it, and I'll kind of let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said for the most part as well, and I think it's also sends a signal to the other conferences. And talking about Big 12
100%.
and ACC here, the Pac-12 and what's left of it, but you know, you're going to have teams wanting to jump ship. We've already seen Florida State and what they're doing as well, and then there's been talks about Clemson for years now. Those teams right there that have won national titles recently, Clemson, I'm speaking of. This
Florida
just
State
sends you
too.
yeah.
Florida,
Oh
they
yeah,
won one in
2013.
2014.
Yeah,
13, yeah.
yeah. Clemson more recently, but those programs are powerhouses, man. I know they're ACC, but you look at what's happening with the Big Ten and the SEC here. I mean, how can you keep your teams in with the TV money that ACC is getting, which is what, like half of what the ACC and Big Ten are getting?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this points to them like, hey, if we need to jump ship now sooner than later. I mean, what is the ACC going to do in response to this? What is the Big 12 going to do in response to this? Especially with the conference realignment and such. So it's a mess, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of really fallback from this stuff as well. From these other conferences, they're going to start making moves, either the programs themselves or the ACC, in an effort to keep them.
I don't disagree with you, but I do think that I think Florida State's. I would be very interested to see their financial books and how healthy their finances are, right? Because they have seemed to be making the most noise in the past 2 years about, hey, we're not making the same amount of money as XYZ, Big Ten, SEC, or even the Big 12. The Big 12's TV contracts is actually pretty good, right? Considering the quality of that league. So I think Florida State, right? I have no knowledge of this. I don't know their finances. I haven't seen it, but if you're just looking at a high level, right, and you're comparing Clemson versus Florida State. Clemson, there has been rumblings about their discomfort, but there hasn't been an all-out assault from their administration and their donors to try to break away from the ACC. My guess is that the Clemson has a very healthy athletic department, has their finances in straight, has their finances in order. Their donors are aligned. I imagine there is some sort of collective that they have going on. I don't think that they're as eager to get out of the ACC, not because they don't want to, but because they're not desperate to. I think Florida State probably, I'm guessing, I'm hypothesizing here, but their reaction, their adverse reaction to the ACC, we're going to put our foot down. This isn't unjust. We're going to sue them, this and that. I don't know if they probably have the money to sue the ACC and go the distance with this. I think that they're just hoping that they're make more noise in order to break away. And what I mean by this, why I bring this up is you're correct. I think we're going to see a huge fallout, but I think when you have these two main conferences in the driver's seat, right? The Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to look at the schools that are looking to join on a case by case basis. I don't think they're just going to blanket say, Florida State, that's a good brand. Let's just bring them on and give them the same share that we should. I think they could probably look at Florida State and be like, okay, well, you guys are currently operating at like a $10 million loss year over year for the past 3 years. Like, you can join us, but you're not going to get the same piece of the pie, right? You're not going to get the same. And I think that's where things are going to get interesting, right? And I think that's where the Big Ten and the SEC, and my guess is probably the Big 12, and then some sort of form of the Mountain West schools, and I think some ACC schools. There's going to be this consolidation, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think there's going to be a commissioner that comes to play. I don't know when that is, right? But right now, I think it just comes down to the Big Ten and the SEC be like, look, our shit's in order, pardon my French, but it's like, we're not just going to accept Florida State because Florida State had one good season and, they have a good following. It's like, this is a business. If we're going to separate from the NCAA, our job is to make money, and we might not just welcome Florida State with open arms because they think that they are a top tier school. It's like,
yeah, exactly. Or Clemson too. And I could see something like that. And you make me think of that, welcome in Florida State, not give them the full amount of revenue share that the other schools get. Let's just say, we're talking hypothetical SEC. They'd be like, hey, 3 years, you get half revenue sharing from other teams. And then that fourth year, you can be eligible for whatever, whether they do it incrementally or what. But yeah, so I think there's going to be a lot of dominoes here to fall left with this alliance that the Big Ten and SEC created. And speaking of the NCAA and Tennessee, and I promise, guys, we'll get to the UGA football players here in just a sec, but Tennessee and NCAA are going straight up to war, man. I have. Can you recall like a school being so quick to calling out the NCAA and really just calling BS immediately? Like, their AD was on it, their chancellor was on it, within a few days of this situation. And reading, I've tried to read up on this and get a good feeling about it. And for at least right now, it doesn't look good for the NCAA.
No.
Trying to retroactively, you were saying about being proactive a minute ago, retroactively trying to enforce rules that weren't in place yet. That I don't even know why that's a thing. I can't wrap my mind around that already, like at all.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, and here's why. It's like they're trying to rewrite history a little bit about like, hey, we're now this regulating body. Let's go back and this person committed a crime 6 months ago, but it wasn't a crime then, so we didn't pass the law until today. It's like it doesn't make any sense. And so like, and this is what I mean about the NCAA. It's like they are digging their own grave, right? And it's not a legal body. It's not like a fourth branch of government, right? It's really just like a sophisticated like boys and girls club or like AAU. It is a governing body over college sports, right?
It's the HOA, baby. It's the HOA of college sports.
Yeah, seriously. But it's like in like I get it, right? Like the record books and right, like it's this idea like Reggie Bush isn't a Heisman winner. Well, he is to me. I still got his jersey. I'm hanging up in my closet, my mom's house back home, right? Like I so what I think that the NCAA needs to do, and they need to do it fast, is they need to get public opinion back on their side, and they're not going to get public opinion back on their side by going to court with two. It's the University of Virginia and it's University of Tennessee, right? It's like
Yeah. And
those,
those schools have already took it to the federal level.
yeah. And if you go back and like if you're you know if you like the wonky policy law stuff like um Justice Kavanaugh, his opinion on the NIL and the last time there was like a federal hearing on like the NIL stuff for amateurism, he basically said, NCA, you guys are a bunch of idiots, right? Like, and he obviously said it in a much more eloquent way, and has all the proper education, and he's a Supreme Court justice. I am not. I am the idiot. So it's like, but he was basically saying like, you guys don't have much ground, like to be doing what you're doing and trying to enforce these kind of like flaw laws. And I think the NCAA, what it does have is it does have an infrastructure in place and a connectivity, like a connective network to all of these schools. And that's why I'm like, if I was just like had Charlie Baker over beers one night, I would just be like, Governor Baker, you have such an opportunity to here to like create a more like a perfect version of college football, right? But like and you have to stop trying to be this governing body or this sheriff in town when like the gun that you got in your holster shoots blanks. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's no way to enforce the stuff, and even if you did, like there's no going back. Players are going to get paid, and until we get regulation on how they get paid and who can pay them, it's going to be the wild, wild west, right? I'm not against players getting paid. I'm not necessarily even against the transfer portal. I think you should be allowed to transfer once and only once, and then you have to graduate and have eligibility remaining to transfer again.
Mhm.
But that's my personal opinion. But I do think that in order for them to have like a functioning pay for play system, there does need to be a regulated body. And I think that probably has to be a commissioner. But the NCA is them trying to like put the
Mhm.
genie back in the bottle and regulate with new sets of laws is totally stupid. And this
Yeah.
Tennessee one is like Tennessee has done dumb stuff in the past. I don't think I don't think they're in the wrong here.
No, I mean, and that you said it right there in the past. Like they're one of the most notorious, violators of NCAA
No.
rules in the SEC. But in this case, at least we don't know all the facts. And in my opinion, from what I've read, and I think I'm in the majority here with what I'm reading from other folks as well, is that the NCAA looks pretty in the wrong here, or at least dumb, and
Yeah.
in retrospect. But the last thing that we'll touch on here, we've been expecting this already, is Harbaugh to LA. He's been the
Mhm.
favorite to join the Chargers for weeks now. He finally did it. His press conferences were hilarious. I mean, he is a machine for one-liners. But Sharon Moore, they made the right move in getting him and just naming him as soon as possible to take over in
Mhm.
Michigan. He won 4 games without Harbaugh there this past season. I think in that program, for them to keep that talent and still maintain the recruiting class and such, it was the right move, and I think it'll work out well for them. Now they do have to play a really loaded Ohio State team next year in a conference that expands with Oregon. I don't know how Oregon will look with losing Bo Nix and the players that they did. I think that remains to be seen as well. I see a lot of people just jumping on Oregon already. I
You
don't
have
want.
Phil Gabriel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have really two talented quarterbacks from the transfer portal, and Dylan's one of them, and he's most experienced. We got to see them play, I think, first. But I think that's a huge move for your national champions losing their head coach like Harbaugh. So Sharon Moore's going to have a lot on his plate next year. But I know you agreed that that was the right move for them.
Yeah, I think it was the only move, really. I think there was probably one other coach that they if they had any inclination of being like, maybe Schramer's not the guy, the only other person that you call is Brian Kelly. And I know that was kind of out in the public that he would be interested in that job, and because in the and again we've been talking about it all day, right? And we've been talking about it really all year. It's like trying to create a program of continuity, of consistency, of developing your players. It's so hard to do in this era of college sports, particularly college football, because of the transfer portal, because of this idea of free agency. And the only way that you can do that is by building a culture.
Mm.
And that culture is usually comes from the top, right? It's why Kirby Smart has had so much success. It's why Nick Saban had so much success, right? And I know Ohio State hasn't won the national championship, but like that continuity of Urban Meyer to Ryan Day to this, Ohio State is still a very good program, right? They still win a ton of football games. Like there has to be consistency at the top. You're going to lose players no matter what, but but instead of having a mass exodus, I think Michigan was like, okay, this guy has proven that he can handle media attention. He has proven that he can win football games as a head coach, even if it's interim, and he has proven that he has won the popular vote, if you will, of the team.
Yeah.
I think that was the best chance of them of filling a massive hole, and I don't want to call it a sinking ship, but Harbaugh is a different breed, and I think if they would have gone elsewhere than more, it could have gotten pretty ugly in terms of a
It,
max exodus.
it could have been an Alabama situation. And I think,
Yeah.
it's hard to ignore. I don't think the decision makers just completely ignored what happened in Alabama. Now, Alabama has recovered and signed the number 2 class in the country. They brought a lot of players with them and such as well, and they held on to some really marquee guys. So I think the long run doesn't look as bad as it did though for the first week or so. But I think it's hard to ignore that, and they made the right decision. Now let's get to our Bulldogs here,
Mhm.
Artie. I want to touch briefly on the Senior Bowl before we get into what Georgia football players have been telling us at the Players Lounge about UGA signees. So Lad McConkey, Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith, even Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, all had really big weeks at the Senior Bowl. I was covering that this week. I really love it because it's this time, man. January. I mean, I know we have the Super Bowl coming up, but it's at least in college football and such. I mean, it's just this is the time that drags on through the year, right? And
Mhm.
so I love really turning the attention to the draft and seeing where these guys who I've covered for years end up going, what guys think about them as far as draft analysts and such, and how teams are responding to them. But those guys I mentioned had really big weeks. McConkey was named the MVP of his team as far as
Oh,
receivers go,
I didn't
and
realize
that's
that.
by the opposing DBs,
I
right?
didn't
So
hear that. Yeah.
that's the really cool part I think that Jim Nagy does with the Senior Bowl and such. Those MVPs are player driven. Like who was the
Yeah.
toughest guy to go against? You know what I mean? Conkey had a great week, and I think that ankle and his injuries that he suffered last year. I mean, he played in the Orange Bowl and he was in Senior Bowl, so he's showing that toughness, and I think he's recovered pretty well. I mean, he's moving really well in and out of his breaks. Man, just sure hands as always. He usually won those one-on-ones. So I think that was big for him. Javon Bullard, also MVP of his team for DBs.
Oh, that. Yeah.
And he got beat one-on-ones here and there, but you know this better than anybody. Those one-on-ones with like safeties and these receivers and tight ends, those are meant for those receivers to
Dude,
win.
that doesn't mean
Basically.
anything.
Yeah, right.
But like,
But
I
in the
saw some
game,
of the rumblings about the Florida State stuff, and I was like, I was
that's
like, this shit is so stupid. But go
That's just
ahead.
Danny Cannell. Danny Cannell sees one
Uh,
catch over a one-on-one, and he's calling out, "Oh, he didn't play in the Orange Bowl." Like,
yeah. All
yes,
right,
if one of your 28 players, or if maybe 10 of your 28 players would have played, it might have been more competitive, sure. But anyway, at any rate, Javon Bullard also MVP from the opposing receivers, running backs for his team, and then Tyke Smith. those guys, McConkey and Bullard, earned the MVPs during the week of practice. Now, Tyke Smith had a great scrimmage game on Saturday, and ended up winning the MVP of the game for the American team. So, and Tyke showed, and he was in a different spot. They were moving him around, trying him in different areas in the secondary, and he had 3 pass breakups, looked really good. And Marcus Rosemy was named one of the biggest risers of the week. Had a big touchdown catch in the scrimmage game. Mossed a guy. Yeah, that was beautiful. So
that corner of the end zone, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're a Georgia fan, you coming out, you feeling pretty well because I know these guys and this fan base wants to see these guys really succeed and get drafted higher, make a statement in the league. And I think at least after this week, in front of all those NFL personnel that are down in Mobile, it's a good sign for those guys. Now,
yeah, the Senior Bowl pretty interesting, and I got to play in it coming out. And the best thing about it is it mocked like kind of a week long preparation of the NFL, right? They, at least when I was there, you have both staffs are typically NFL staffs, right? When I was there, it was like the bottom 2 teams, their staffs that didn't get fired, that were still intact, would go coach. So I actually had Mike Smith was the old Atlanta Falcons coach, was my coach at the time, and I think the other one was Gus Bradley possibly for the Jaguars, but it really gives these players who an opportunity to be evaluated in an NFL environment, because the combine is that's like a modeling contest, right?
Yeah, you're in underwear, running 40s. You got appendages coming out of your underwear. Yeah.
Yeah. The Senior Bowl, they give you a playbook, right? That playbook is from the offensive staff and the defensive staff, and you do a full install, and you go out there, and it's not an exact replica of a game week, because you're obviously competing much more. The practices are longer, and you're going like ones on ones and full contact and this and that. But I think when you see Georgia players, not surprisingly, show out and be recognized for their ability to perform at a high level, it's a really cool sign and a good sign for them, because they're not doing it in the comfort of their own home in Athens, right? This is like, it's an all-star game, right? It's the most prestigious upperclassmen. It's the Senior Bowl for a reason, right? It was one of my goals when I entered college, or enter my senior year, I should say, is get an invite to the Senior Bowl, because I'm pretty sure it's 100. I think they have 50 and 50. It's the top 100 seniors or like declared eligible upperclassmen who graduated in the country. And for those guys to go out there, earn the respect of the other players, but also earn the respect of the coaching staffs, which are all NFL coaching staff, it's pretty cool. It says a lot about the program that Kirby has built. Obviously, we all know that because of the wins and losses and championships, right? Or the few losses, the many wins, and the championship. But I just think when you get to see players like Ladd McConkey, who had I bet you if you asked him, hey man, how's your mental health? Like, how you doing? He probably struggled this year in so many different ways.
Oh yeah.
And he always has that smile ear to ear, squinty eyes when he's smiling. Like he's probably hurting down, and he probably was able to go train for a few weeks and then come into this opportunity, that Senior Bowl, and really show out.
Yeah.
And be valued for who he is, a game changer.
Yeah, and a couple things I'll add to that you made me think of before we move on to the Players Lounge and what we were told recently. But, Ladd McConkey and Javon Bullard are both former 3-star prospects, right? Javon was barely a top 100 safety. McConkey was not even in the top 100 receivers, had a handful of offers coming out of high school. I think that's why I'm a Ladd McConkey stan.
Yeah, totally.
And Javon Bullard stan, just because, not only did I cover these guys when they were playing, but also where they came from. Being unheralded, his recruitment really didn't even pick up till his senior year.
Totally.
So just seeing those guys, and even Marcus Rosemy, the injury he had as a freshman, broke his stinking leg against Florida, right? And then came back and had the career that he did, dropped 2 passes in his career, I believe.
Ridiculous.
Exactly, right? And then Tyke, the ACL injuries, the injury issues he had really the majority of his time at Georgia before coming on strong, playing behind some first-round picks. So this is kind of that story that we love, and me and you, the story part of football and really team sports in general, and seeing these guys succeed. So I'm really excited to watch these guys pro day and NFL combine as well.
Resilience, baby. Resilience. You got to love it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then also just from a practice perspective, I mean, you talk about, this points towards the success of Kirby Smart's program. And I think I agree because
Mhm.
the practice you hear nonstop, and we hear it all the time with these players telling us, Players Lounge, and you hear it in even press conferences on your weekly games basis. But they talk about how much they compete at practices and the level that the standard they are held to, and just competing. I don't hear it as much, listening to other teams and those players, what they talk about. It's always a mainstay as far as these guys talking to the
Mhm.
media and talking to folks like, hey, we this ain't, the game days are easier because these practice, we don't mess around at Georgia. So I think that's
Competition.
why.
They raise it to a different
Exactly.
level, dude. It's
So
different.
when these guys go and meet the top players in the country, they're already used to competing against 5-star guys, really good players. I mean, it's not a big difference, even though, like you said, you're not in the comfortability of your own home, your own stadium. But let's get into this. Art, I'm excited about this, man. Let's bring this
Yeah.
up. All right. Yeah, guys. So I'm going to go through a few slides here. And for you listening at home, I've got a graphic up right now on YouTube that is really a picture of an article that I wrote, including everything that Georgia football players have told the Players Lounge this offseason about UGA's signees. Number one recruiting class, like I said, these guys are really good. And we'll start with 5-star Joseph Jonah Njoye. Hopefully, I didn't butcher his name too much, but 5-star defensive lineman, number 11 at the position, 6'4", 275. Really highly recruited guy. His teammates was Justin Williams. They're out of Conroe, Texas. But so this right here is from Nazir Stackhouse. Nose tackle decided to come back for another year, so he's going to be a really a marquee leader on this Georgia front. And I'll say, I quote, they showed, he's talking here about Joseph and also defensive lineman, and this guy is really unheralded when you think of the quality of the class. But Namdi Ogboko, South Garner, North Carolina, right? 3-star guy. He's number 96 at his position, but he's really stood out. He said they've showed a lot of development, a lot of maturity. You can tell that they want to learn and they're ready to work. They've got a breakout season coming up. So, already the reason this stood out to me is, you have this huge, like a highly talented class, and a guy like Namdi Ogboko has already made an impression. So that a senior guy who's been doing it at Georgia for 4 years, so that really stood out to me there for him. And then Joseph, I mean, really highly talented guy. So it makes sense for him to already be making a statement as well. And then another one I have for you here is previously mentioned Justin Williams, 5-star linebacker, just one of the best players in this class overall, number one rated linebacker in the class. And then Chris Cole, who on 3 has him as the number one outside linebacker in the class in their final rankings, right? So you can see Chris Cole either playing inside, outside, and Justin, I think, obviously an inside guy, but they really stood out to Lawson Lucky. It's our boy number 7. We'll see what he can do next year. Excited to watch him, man.
Me
But
too.
he joined the Players Lounge, and we asked him, what are a couple of defenders who are really standing out early to him? And Artie, you can talk about this, is the relationship between the tight ends and the linebackers and going against them every day.
Yeah.
And you were telling us some awesome stories last week, but what Lawson really focused on here, and I think stands out to me, is he says, I think Justin Williams and Chris Cole, linebackers, they both look good. They're athletic as heck. Justin's real vocal already. That stands out to me, Artie, right? As a
Mhm.
freshman coming in there in a loaded linebacker room with Smael Mondon, CJ Allen, Raylan Wilson, those
Inside guy
guys.
too. Inside linebacker too, right? Williams.
Yeah. hmm
Yep.
Yeah. So him being vocal, and Georgia asks a lot of its linebackers, right?
100%. Captain of the defense.
So, and he says everyone likes him in the locker room. So it looks to me like we can expect Justin at least one day to be that leader here in this room. Any thoughts on that? The relationship between the tight end and this is coming from Lawson Lucky, so I think you have an
Yeah, man,
insight.
he's spot on. Like, you have such a unique vantage point of evaluating those linebackers, particularly the outside linebackers, safeties too, but more to a lesser extent, really that the level of competition. So, for reference, the stories from last podcast were basically like Daryl Gamble, who was the Sam linebacker, and then Jordan Jenkins, who was Sam linebacker, and that traditional Grantham 3-4, which is not too dissimilar to what Kirby runs, the stand up guys. As a tight end, it's like, particularly during spring ball, those outside linebackers, I kid you not, it's like a heavyweight fight, man. It's like you'll go up, you'll do a rep. If it's inside the drill, their defense has an advantage, and they're just kind of like loading up and just absolutely whiplashing your body back to about a yard because they know that it's an inside run, right? 11 on 11. It's just you're going against the same one or two guys. Really, it's just one guy. My guess is Lawson is seeing like the same person over and over again. That would most likely be not Justin, but Chris Cole. He and Chris Cole are probably going at it. They're probably both going against the twos because my guess is Lucky's getting all the two reps at tight end, and they're probably just battling it out day
Mhm.
in, day out, right? My guess
Yeah.
is Lawson Lucky has a sore neck. He's probably got a couple stingers. He's probably got a busted shoulder, and vice versa. Although defensive guys will never admit it, my guess is that those dudes are beat up too, right? And
Yeah.
it is a unique perspective because, you know, I'm sure the offensive guard centers, you know, have a different perspective on the interior guys, right? The receivers have different perspectives on the DBs, and so on and so forth. But that outside linebacker tight end relationship, it's love hate, right? You have this like love and respect for him, but every time you see him, like when you both are trotting on the field for your reps during team drills, you're like, shit, I got DG right now again. You know what I mean? And it is a unique relationship, but I think Lawson, when he says those compliments, it's
Yeah.
because he's going against these guys every single day, day in and day out, and it's a respect that he's building with them.
Exactly. I think that really stood out to me in that area. And then you talk a little bit about that as well, and Lawson Lucky and
Yeah.
going up against these guys. And I think that, and this is on the Players Lounge as well, guys. You can read it there. But in his interview alone, beyond this quote, he talked a little bit about putting on weight. He said he played too light last year. He said he just felt really light out there. And that makes sense to what the stories you tell us, what we know about football in this tight end relationship with the defense, and he's pushing around these huge SEC defenders. And he wants to be more like 245-ish coming into next season. So I think that's something to watch out for. How does Lawson look in the spring? And I think these two, Justin Williams, Chris Cole, they definitely need to put on some weight. I expect them to with, uh, just 2 months until the spring game. I think these guys are going to put on some serious weight. And they usually do from that in this Georgia program. They look differently than when they signed and they get the spring ball.
I mean, you
So
you got to think about the extra layer of human like physical padding you got to put on your body, right? Like a great example was Cornelius Washington. I'm sure dog fans remember Cornelius, right? Pretty sure Cornelius was from Washington County. This guy about 6'4". He was a 100 meter and 100 meter sprint, 110 meter hurdles, like state finalist, and he was about 6'4", maybe like 215 in high school. I saw him as a true freshman. He redshirted his freshman year, my senior year of high school when I visited. I remember looking at him. I was like, "Who is that Greek god putting his hand in the dirt and just like booking it?" And Coach Rick was like, "He's going to be a good one. He's a freshman." He ran, gave me the whole spiel on his background. Cornelius, I think he still ran a 4.5 at the combine, but Cornelius was 215 when I first met him. By the time he and I lifted together through college, by the time he got to, I think he weighed in at like 275 at the combine,
whoa,
right? He still
whoa,
had a six pack, still looked like the Hulk, but just like, when people talk about like, oh, you got to put on some weight, like, yes, they're going to grow into it, but in the SEC specifically, too, right? It's like, across the league, people are like their bodies are maturing, but you got to have like 20, 30, 40 pounds over what your natural weight should be. So I bet you Lawson Lucky, when it's all said and done, he'll probably be about 248 to 255. He'll still be fast. He'll still be quick. He'll still be a receiver. But when you're that young pup and you got, and they say, and the coach say, you're light in the ass. When they say you're light in the ass, it's because, like, yeah, you can get whipped around a little bit, not because you're not tough, not because you're not good, not because you're not strong, but because, like, the dudes who have been around for 3 or 4 years, they're no
yeah,
longer light in the ass. You know what I mean?
physics, dude.
Physics, dude.
We'll move on here to another one. This was on London Humphreys, Vanderbilt transfer. I think he was coming out the number one rated transfer wide receiver in the country. He's going to have 3 years of eligibility remaining.
Awesome.
And Georgia fans know this man because he was responsible for the first Vanderbilt touchdown against Georgia in 5 seasons. And this was just past year. And remember that this was in that part of the season already where we had that tough start to Georgia football each week, right? And this was just another rendition of that when he took that slant 49 yards for a score. And sure enough, Georgia adds him 6'3". He was a track guy, fast as all get out. And we basically got that confirmed by Georgia now. And this is from Warren Brinson, defensive lineman. He quotes, "He's fast. Oh, my God. I remember that my first play against Vandy, this kid caught a slant. I turned around. I was like, man, this is a white flash just running down the field." And he added, "He's taller than you think." So he does have that 6'3" body. Guys, this is a report straight from Warren Brinson. This kid's fast. He's fast. So we like the speed. We like the speed for Georgia, and we want that downfield threat, right? And I think London has the tools to do that. Little something for you guys. And we'll move
Size
on.
and speed, baby. Gotta have it. Gotta love it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this Georgia receiver room is going to be so loaded. We don't have anything on Michael Jackson yet, but I would have loved to hear a little bit about him coming from USC. Yeah, Michael Jackson III, great name. Coming over from USC, had some injury issues at USC, but he was one of those guys that didn't drop passes when he did get chances. He also was a return specialist, quick as all get out, really shifty. Reminds me more of like a Lad McConkey, shifty, really quick out of his breaks. So he's an exciting player to watch, as well as Miami receiver Colby Young. He's got that 6'5", 230 body already that he can also run after the catch. And I was looking at his highlights today again. So all these guys, I think
that's a Marlon Brown frame, dude.
He does look like Marlon Brown. Now I didn't even think of that. Yeah, he really does.
I used to give Marlon grief. I'm like, hey man, if you want me to move to offensive guard, you can come play tight end. Because when Marlon was like at his peak, he was about 225 and just a freak, dude.
Yeah,
love that dude. Anyway,
yeah. So all these guys, it's really interesting. How do you think they work in the dynamic of the room? That they do lose Ladd and Marcus, and who's going to play? And I think the spring game, these guys are going to get a lot of reps. But that first week of the season, I think we're going to see some telltale signs of what guys have come in and grown in the offense, learned the offense, and are good enough to compete there and contribute. And then last one I've got here for you guys is the key one, and that's Ryan Puglisi. And we had a show that really popped off already for us last month or so, maybe 2 months ago, really comparing him and what we get in him and the Dylan Raiola situation. This guy's a gamer. This guy stuck with Georgia throughout his recruitment, committed to Georgia. Dylan Raiola committed to Georgia, the same class. Also, the number one stinking recruit in the class, quarterback. Puglisi was sitting there around the number 10, really right there in the top 10. And he stuck with Georgia. He doubled down on his commitment. People were asking for interviews like, hey, how does this affect you? He's like, no, I'm here to compete, man. I'm, go Dogs all the way through, never wavered. That's just, and I think we fanboyed over him a little bit for that in our show. And I think it's really impressive. Now, beyond the mindset, what about physical traits? What about the arm? How's he playing in the competition for the bowl practice? How was that? How was he stepping up? And this is from Warren Brinson, Jacob Hardy, and also Miles Thornton, receiver. He said players behind him are forgetting to go in because we're all just like, wow, he's really cold. That's what Hardy said, because when they were practicing, and you know how it works, Hardy, you got to rotate in, take your reps, and the guys were just in awe, standing back like, okay, this guy has some game in him. And then Warren added, I was in his face talking to him before the plays. It doesn't even phase him, right? So that's even another thing, right? Because you're going to have guys like Warren. I mean, they're always going to be talking and chirping. And can you stick in there with like a senior like that? You got a freshman guy just trying to get his feet wet, and you got guys chirping at you. How do you respond? So it looks like he's good from that standpoint.
Dude, he's got that, like, I don't know this kid, obviously. He's from New England, right? Went to prep school in Connecticut, Avon Old Farm, shout it out. But I think he's got that spunk, that it factor, right? I think it's like he's probably the type of dude growing up, like sandlot baseball, pickup basketball, pickleball, whatever it is. He's like, game on. You know what I mean? And that's the vibe I get from him. I'm obviously biased. Anytime we can get New Englanders down south and suiting up for red and black, sign me up. But I think he's going to be good, dude. I think he's going to be freaking good.
Yeah, and now I add this for you just listening wherever you get your podcast. He looks good. He's got a huge arm. Yeah, he's going to be the player, and that was from Lawson Lucky. He's already caught some passes from him himself. So really excited about these guys, Artie, and I think having this little bit of intel from these Georgia players is really awesome. I think it's really exciting for me when we come to spring football, and that's really in the back of my mind all the time. I know it's yours as well. See what these guys look like on the field in that Georgia uniform for the first time, because that's where it all starts, man. That's where we all the Georgia fans, their favorite players, again, got their start there. Yeah, it's the first time you see them in Sanford Stadium. And let's give us a barometer on how these guys might add to a really talented team next season.
Yeah, I think you guys just look at it like this, right? And we've talked about this. We've belabored this point a little bit, right? There's nothing like the substitute for in-game experience, right? But it's hard to get that because you're not always going to get the reps, right? If you're an underclassman, you might get a couple kickoffs here or there. You might play nickel if you get a couple reps at nickel, or short yard situations if you're a tight end, or you might, if in Ryan's case, you might not sniff the field at all until like game 6 when we're up by 50, or they might not want to burn his red shirt. But this period of development, right? Spring ball, it cannot be understated how important it is, not only for the collective team's growth and development, but these young people, right? Like I started to learn the intricacies around the game of football, not my first camp at Georgia, but my first spring ball, right? The different coverages, understanding when, if the safety's rolling down, it's because they're rolling to something on the backside. And like, I'm going to be like, my route is going to change if I can pick up on these indicators here front side. Like that's the stuff that like it's so hard to learn in preseason, because preseason is such a short period of time, and then like game on, you know what I mean? It's like we got Chick-fil-A kickoff against a top 10 matchup or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But this opportunity, it's like a slower pace, but practices are full speed and you're going against your dudes, right? You're building up that love-hate relationship with the outside linebackers as a tight end. And I can't say enough good things about spring ball. And personally, I'm glad I got to finish out my senior year spring, but I do think it cannot be underestimated by these mid-year guys. And I feel like everyone does it now. It wasn't as common when I was there, but they're going to get such a leg up. You know what I mean? They're going to get such a leg up for having these 15 practices and scrimmages and then rolling into that summer workout, right? Because it's not only that they're getting the bowl practice maybe or the spring practice, but when January 1 starts of that first semester or first day of second semester, it's like they're in the weight room, right? They that light in the ass comment I made, like they're bulking up. They're on a fitness regime, a nutrition regime, and kind of like they're being indoctrinated, if you will, in the Kirby Smart regime. And I think it benefits them, man. I'm excited. I'm really, really excited for them.
Yeah, me too. And the vast majority of Georgia's class has already been on campus since December 20th. So
that's crazy to me.
Good signs for them. And we have, and you mentioned there the kickoff game, looking way, way, way too far ahead. Clemson. And the thing about Clemson is doing some Clemson coverage for the Players Lounge this past season. Their offense has a lot of questions, right? It was the first year and under Riley's offensive coordinator, and Klubnik, really inconsistent. But that defense has some serious dudes. It reminds me of that game in 21, Georgia and Clemson. All right, because that defense is
in
serious.
Charlotte, right?
Yeah, in 21 it was in Charlotte. Yeah. But that's something way too far ahead to watch out for. Is that defense for Clemson is good. They're stacked with talent. They play well. They play together. Offense, some questions, but Georgia's going to have.
I do like that quarterback though. I think the quarterback. Yeah, I think he's got some spunk.
Man, he shows flashes. But then there's a lot of times where he reminded me a little bit of JJ McCarthy as far as inconsistency last year.
That's a good call. That's good.
But he's much younger. So right, he has that room for growth, but. That's for another time. We'll get in that for sure later. Guys, I thank you so much for watching and listening wherever you get your podcasts. On YouTube, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. We're trying to grow this thing and bring on Arthur Lynch. I'm really excited about that. We hope to do some live podcasts for everyone this year as well and have some guests on. We're working on some big things there. And also follow Arthur on Twitter at alynch1788. I'm at jcshelton_. We also post our stuff through UGA Football Live. And please check out the Players Lounge. We've got a lot of good stuff. We just talked to Carson Beck recently. First time we're releasing that. So that'll be coming out next week, I believe. I think we have a story coming out today as well from Graham Coffee. So please check us out there. We'll see you next time. Artie and I will be back. UGA Football Live.
Go Dogs.